Hi, everyone. Welcome to Grin and Grow Break. I'm Kathy Carlton Willis, and I'm known as God's Grin Gal. I'm here today to talk to you about a chapter from my book, The Grin Gal's Guide to Wellbeing. And the chapter we're covering is Comparison Traps and Competitive Spirits. It's a tough chapter, but it's one that we need to think through as we're talking about well-being for body, soul, and spirit. So here we go. As you've been on this well-being warrior journey for a while, you may have noticed some problems surfacing. Two of the common ones are comparison traps and competitive spirits. If you're doing well towards your goals, others will notice. Some of them will even be jealous, or perhaps you have watched others move closer to success while your journey is taking longer. We can do a lot of damage when we allow our minds and our hearts to be invested in comparison traps, or if we develop a competitive spirit, or suffer when someone else responds that way to us because we're making positive changes. How can you conquer these issues and crucify those pesky comparison traps and competitive spirits that stir up within you? Sometimes the worst comparison trap we get stuck in is when we compare ourselves with a former version of ourselves, a better version, a younger version, a fitter version, a thinner version, a stronger version. You get the idea. I lifted weights at professional levels and was preparing to compete when I was afflicted with a life-altering disease at age 28. Since then, I almost died a couple times, have been in a wheelchair a lot. I always rehab and always do what I can to return to physical fitness, but I want to confess a battle that happens in my mind sometimes. When I'm in the trap, I compare what I can do now to what I could do in my prime. And I grieved that I started losing fitness before I ever really hit my prime due to my age when I was afflicted. Here's the thing. Even people who don't have ongoing medical issues can't stay at their prime game forever. I remind myself of that fact. I can either be a couch potato or I can live life at 100%, even if my 100% today is less than my 100% when I was at my prime conditioning. Deconditioning isn't merely stalling out in neutral. It's actually sliding backwards. Doing what I can prevents the deconditioning that happens from settling for less than today's best. I've had to modify what I do. I found other activities that give me that same adrenaline rush as lifting heavy weights. It's like anything else in life. I may not be able to do everything, but I'm able to do something. And maybe that's something you can tell yourself when this starts to get to you as well. When our health causes us to lose something we love, there's a grief involved that is as bad as having someone die. If you're dealing with that, give yourself some extra grace. I'm sure others give you that grace. They understand. Gracing your grief is a different thing than pity. It's simply being real that our current circumstances are different than before. It's hard to say goodbye to those glory days of our former ability, but we know all of this is temporary compared to eternity. So let's look at this thing called competitive spirits and comparison traps. Romans 8:18 in the Amplified says, "But what of that? For I consider that the sufferings of this present time, this present life, are not worth being compared with the glory that is about to be revealed to us and in us and for us and conferred on us." Obviously, I'm not trying to win the approval of people. This is Galatians 1:10, but of God. If pleasing people were my goal, I would not be Christ's servant. Is one cause of comparison traps and competitive spirits the fact that you are worried about what others will think of you? And how do you address that in your life? I want to cover this next passage. It's Romans 12, 1 through 3. We think of it a lot, but this is in the Message, which is a paraphrase. And so maybe it's something a little differently worded than what you've considered before. Here we go. It's easy to say that our desire is to have God's approval, and we want to please God by being Christ's servant, but it's harder to put into practice. What are some of your struggles with this? So here's what I want you to do. God helping you take your everyday, ordinary life. You're sleeping, eating, going to work, and walking around life, and place it before God as an offering. Embracing what God does for you is the best thing you can do for Him. Don't become so well adjusted to your culture that you fit into it without even thinking. Instead, fix your attention on God. You'll be changed from the inside out. Readily recognize what He wants from you and quickly respond to it. Unlike the culture around you, always dragging you down to its level of immaturity, God brings out the best in you, develops well-formed maturity in you. I'm speaking to you out of a deep gratitude for all that God has given me, and especially as I have responsibilities in relation to you. Living then, as every one of you does, in pure grace, it's important that you not misinterpret yourselves as people who are bringing this goodness to God. No, God brings it all to you. The only accurate way to understand ourselves is by what God is and by what He does for us, not by what we are and what we do for Him. This will really help us as we think about those comparison traps and competitive spirits. So here's just a few questions to go along with Romans 12, 1 through 3. What does it take to give your body to God? And what is the motivating factor for that? We know this is not a one and done act of surrender. So when is it necessary to present your body to God again and again? Another version talks about being a living and holy sacrifice. What does that look like? Do you fight with the idea that God can find your sacrifice acceptable? Write about your struggle. How do you worship God with your living sacrifice? And what happens when we copy the behavior and attitudes of the culture around us? God transforms us into a new person by changing the way we think. What does that mean for your life today? And what do you sense is God's will for you regarding well-being of body, soul, and spirit? As you read this chapter in my book, I have much more information than I'm giving in this video presentation. So be sure to read the whole chapter. It will really help you. I reread it because I need this information again and again. So I have a question. What is your biggest struggle with comparison traps? Do you fall prey to any of these things? Think about it. Maybe you've said something like, I wish I had a tiny waist like Tina. Why can't I be successful like Mandy? I can't believe Belinda said that. I would never say such a thing. I don't understand how Teresa can have so much faith despite all the trials she's gone through. I can't seem to muster up even a mustard seed-sized faith. I'm jealous of all the attention Denise is getting at work. I did the heavy lifting on that project, and she's getting all the glory. Maggie is losing 3 times the pounds in half the time as me, and we're on the same program. Why can't I lose more weight? If I didn't have all these terrible circumstances, I could get ahead like Cindy. She doesn't have my, you fill in the blank, to deal with. Those are just some of the ways we talk and think that are not helpful when it comes to this thing of well-being. So here's some steps to comparison trap freedom. I want you to catch yourself in the trap, call yourself on it, and cancel the thought. What are some of the lies your reasoning tells you about your well-being progress, or maybe your lack of progress? 2, keep your eyes on your own work. If life is a test, are you looking for answers on someone else's paper, or do you focus on your own progress? We're only responsible for our own results. So why are we looking at others? 3, I want you to have an impress others-ectomy. Let go of your self-focus. Then you're able to view others as better than yourself without it hurting your heart or making you feel less than. This mindset shift allows you to serve them without getting resentful. Who do you find yourself trying to impress? And how can you change that? Here's a health check for you. For your body, ask yourself, how do I view my body image? What adjustments do I need to make? For your soul, what part of my inner being do I put down and belittle? I wouldn't say those words to someone else. Spirit, do I put undue pressure on myself about my relationship with God. It isn't about performance. Today I was studying about rest, and I realized that a lot of times we say, I'll rest when I get this project done, or I'll rest when this happens, or it's a reward for doing something. It's based on what I can work, and then I get to rest. And that's not it at all. Rest is a gift. It's a gift from God with no strings attached. Ideally, yes, it's a time when I can be still and have a day of rest. But honestly, when it's busy, like today, I'm getting ready to move, I can bring God's rest even into my busy day because it's a gift and it's about what Jesus brings to my life when I don't have these comparison traps, when I don't have this competitive spirit. God's grace will help with my well being. And so that's what I've been realizing today. And think about that line that I said, if life is a test, are you looking for answers on another person's paper, or do you focus on your own progress? Well, this is my last video for the well-being series. I covered the first half of the book this year, but if you go back to my previous videos, last year I covered the second half of the book. I started with that half. So starting next week, if you're in my well-being group, we'll be covering that information. But if you're just watching the video on YouTube, check out my previous talks because you can find the whole book in these various well-being videos. I'm glad you're with me. If you're praying along, I am in the middle of publishing another book for Word Girls. It will be out in April, while also doing a move. We're moving to a new town. We're moving my mom into independent living. She's been living with us, and now she'll be at a senior living facility. And we're doing all the things. We're downsizing. It's a lot. So I appreciate your prayers. And I am praying for you too, because I know that anything I go through isn't unique to me. You guys are going through stuff too. So let's give God us. Let's give him our well-being of body, soul, and spirit, and see what he does with it. It's a living sacrifice. And when we yield it to him, when we give it to him, it's his anyway. But that act of giving it back to him is an act of worship. And that's what we get to do in this journey called life. I'll be back next time with a new video series, and we'll see where God leads us with that. Thank you for listening in. Bye-bye.